Intel launched their Arc GPUs late last year and they were quite frankly terrible. With bad performance pretty much across the board, it wasn't anything that was able to shake up the GPU market in any way. But since then, Intel has been persistent with releasing new drivers to improve performance. But how much performance have these drivers really given us over time? Well, that's what we're going to find out. But before we get into that, here's a quick word from this video sponsor.
I'm never going to be an esports gamer. I never get any kills.
I wouldn't be so sure of that.
Is that Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com?
Yes, my son. It is me, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com.
What are you doing here?
I'm here to bestow upon you a gift that will transform you into a true gamer. With a 24.5-inch Full HD screen, 240Hz refresh rate, 0.5 millisecond response time, AMD FreeSync Premium, and height adjustability, you'll be gaming in the big leagues in no time.
Thank you.
No problem, my son. Why don't you check out the link in the description below to find out more.
Now, being Intel's first graphics card launch, Arc has had its fair share of problems, with performance being the biggest culprit. Performance was so bad that no one was able to recommend these cards. Now with time, however, driver updates are supposed to have brought the performance up by quite a bit, with claims like performance boosts up to 65% better in Outlast Trials, 36% better performance in F1 22, and even up to 313% more performance in Assassin's Creed Unity. Now I will admit, these claims seem almost too good to be true, but I've been surprised before, and who's to say that I won't be surprised again? Now to put this to the test, we need some Arc GPUs, and that is where Sparkle comes in. A brand that you may remember from all the way back in 2008, when they were releasing Nvidia based GPUs, with the last ones they produced actually being part of the GeForce 900 series, meaning those cards are actually older than my children. Yeah, well now they're back and they're part of the Intel Arc family, and we have three cards to have a look at today. First up is Sparkle's big boy, the A750 Titan OC, its little brother, the A750 Orc OC, and then the little itty bitty baby A380 Elf. Now having a closer look at each card without getting caught up too much on specs, the Titan OC runs with a boost clock speed of 2400 MHz along with 8GB of GDDR6 memory clocked at 16 gigabit per second on a 256-bit memory interface with 512GB a second of bandwidth. So with the recent release of the somewhat bandwidth throttled 4060 series and RX 7600 from AMD, could actually be a good contender, especially as it comes in at $259.99 in the US, an honourable yet modest 4% cheaper than the RX 7600 and an even healthier 13% cheaper than the latest Ada Lovelace based RTX 4060. It features a triple fan cooler with a pretty funky dark blue shroud that offsets the brighter blue PCB, which kind of works. Now on top of this, it has a full metal professional looking backplate, and while it's not the prettiest card in the world, it's also far from ugly, and great for a first attempt after all these years. Now the A750 Orc OC is slightly cut down in terms of the cooler, sporting a dual fan design, but overall is practically identical. You'll find the same blue shroud, same full backplate, but obviously being a twin fan cooler is smaller in length and slightly slimmer in thickness. But spec for spec, it's the same. 8GB of GDDR6, the same 2400 MHz boost clock, the same memory bandwidth, though you'd like to think the cooler on the Titan OC will be a little bit better and could maybe help sustain the boost speed for a longer period of time. Though with the Orc model coming in 8% cheaper than the Titan, there could definitely be an argument for both models of the A750. And then we have the run to the litter, the A380 Elf, a card that retails for a mere $139. And for that money, you get a pretty simple affair with an ITX size card that follows the same blue design philosophy as the other two that we have here. The key difference is the A380 requires no supplementary power, unlike the two A750 models that utilise dual 8-pin power connectors. Now under the hood, you get a GPU clocked to 2450 MHz with 6GB of GDDR6 clocked at 15.5 gigabits per second. It's cut down quite dramatically with a 96-bit bus with 186GB per second of bandwidth. So I'm not exactly expecting great things in general from it, but for this price, maybe you can't really go wrong, especially as there really isn't much at the same price point from either AMD or Nvidia. Specs and how things compare to the competition aside, today is all about drivers and seeing how far things have come from launch day to the current release driver. And while beta drivers could offer up even more performance, that's something we'll look to do in future content, comparing the latest release driver against its beta counterpart. So I guess make sure you're subscribed for that. Now to test, we used an Intel Core i9-12900K and 32GB of Patriot Viper Venom 6200MHz DDR5 memory on an Asus ROG Maximus Hero Z690 motherboard. To alleviate any bottleneck, we paired it with a Seagate FireCuda 530 NVMe SSD, and everything was powered by a Thermaltake ToughPower GF3 1350W gold power supply. Now, obviously I do want to make it clear, yes, we have tested on something that you would never in a million years pair these graphics cards with, but that is of course to alleviate any bottleneck. Now also, before we get into the results, I do want to state that we've used the same games we always use for our testing, which should give us a more realistic look as to how the driver update actually affects the average gamer, as opposed to us specifically testing games with huge uplifts from driver updates and providing a biased look at things. Otherwise, if we do test the likes of Assassin's Creed Unity for instance, a title that we don't normally look at, it would artificially inflate things, and that's not what we're about. So, with that out of the way, let's get into those glorious benchmarks. Starting things off with a Plague Tale Requiem, and straight away at 1080p we can see that there isn't really much movement going on, apart from the A750 Titan OC, which on the newer driver, while it did increase performance by a single frame per second, the 1% lows increased by a healthy 23%. 1440p didn't show any noticeable improvements though, and that 1% low increase at 1080p could just be an anomaly, which retesting may see change. In Cyberpunk at 1080p we saw some small but modest gains of 7% on the Titan OC when moving up to the newer drivers, while the Orc OC only saw a 2% increase in performance, which could be deemed as margin of error. The A380 Elf saw the biggest increase though at 10%, which, considering the extra performance comes for free, is actually pretty nice to see. At 1440p, the Titan OC saw 14% more FPS on the newer driver, while the Orc OC saw a smaller but still impressive 11% gain. The A380 Elf card, however, saw no change at all in the averages or the 1% lows, but that is kind of expected at 1440p. Moving over to Death Stranding at 1080p, and the gains keep coming, now with 12% faster performance on the Titan OC card with the newer driver, while the performance on the Orc OC is still good but slightly lower at 9%. The A380 Elf card still sees some gains, but not as much at just 4%, but anything is welcomed. At 1440p, the increases in performance are still very good, with 9% more frames on the A750 Titan OC. There's a much smaller 3% push on the Orc OC, and then a slightly better 6% more performance on the A380 Elf card. Dying Light 2 has the newer driver boosting performance by 4% on the A750 Titan OC, and a smaller single 1 frame per second difference on the Orc OC. And the same on the A380 Elf card, all at 1080p. 1440p sees very similar performance gains of just 3% on the Titan OC and a single FPS better performance on the Orc OC, while the smaller A380 Elf comes in with identical performance between each driver. The extra performance in F122 is fairly decent and something that Intel claimed in their release notes. At 1080p, the Titan OC came in 8% faster on the newer driver, though the 1% lows did dip ever so slightly, while the Orc OC pushed out another 12% more performance, and the lower end A380 Elf gave us the biggest gain of 13% with the newer release driver. 1440p carried on the trend with the 4502 driver, giving us another 11% more performance on the A750 Titan OC, and a pretty dramatic 18% on the Orc A750 card. And the A380 now coming in 12% faster on the newer driver and giving us some pretty impressive numbers overall. Booting up Far Cry 6, and again we see some pretty strong performance already considering the price of the cards, but the driver update just gives us a little more, with 10% more on the Titan OC card and a slightly less but still welcome 6% more on the Orc OC, while the A380 Elf only saw a 1 FPS increase at 1080p. When we move up in resolution, we still see some performance increases of 8% on the Titan, 6% on the Orc and 3% on the Elf, which, while they aren't as big of a gain for the A750 cards, free performance is still free performance. The newest game in our testing suite of games is Hogwarts Legacy, and while we did see some good numbers in terms of the performance gains, the only card that pushes above 60 FPS is the Orc OC card, which the newer driver boosted performance by 13%. The slightly bigger Titan OC card saw a still respectable 7% performance increase, while the A380 Elf saw a gain of 11%. But at just 21 FPS, it's not something you'd be using to play this game at these settings anyway. 1440p is very much the same story, with a 10% bump on the Titan card, 5% on the Orc card, and 8% on the A380 Elf. Though on the lower end card, that does mean a single FPS increase and a frankly unplayable frame rate even with the newer driver. Horizon Zero Dawn was already giving some pretty strong performance at both 1080p and 1440p on both of the A750 base cards, though the newer driver did manage to increase this by around 4% at 1080p and between 7 and 10% at 1440p. Again, the A380 saw no difference in performance at either resolution, and at under 40 FPS, it wouldn't be the most pleasant gaming experience anyway. Marvel's Spiderman Remastered saw some small gains at 1080p of 4% on the Titan, 2% on the Orc, and 9% on the A380 Elf, while 1440p saw some bigger gains of 14% on the Titan OC and 11% on the A380 Elf, though in a weird turn of events, the Orc OC actually lost a single frame per second at the higher resolution. Finally, rounding things off in Watch Dogs Legion, and this gave us the weirdest results yet. While the A750 Titan OC gave us a small increase in performance on the new driver of 4% at 1080p and 3% at 1440p, the other cards had much stranger results. The A750 Orc OC lost 6% performance at both 1080p and 1440p, while the A380 Elf gained 3% more FPS at 1080, but lost a staggering 12% at 1440p. So maybe the optimizations in this game need a little more work. Okay, so some interesting results, especially towards the end where we started to actually see performance take a bit of a U-turn. Though for the most part, the newer driver did see some performance gains, and in some cases, it was quite healthy too, at over 10%. Now, while this is all well and good and free performance is free performance, it also shows in a roundabout way how bad the performance was before, which would have initially put a lot of people off when the cards first launched. But it's definitely a sign that things are actually getting better. Now, while charts of individual games is a lot to take in, it's always actually worth looking at the overall average gains to see how much extra performance the cards now have over the whole suite of games that we tested with. And it's here where at 1080p we see the A750 Titan OC now coming in with 7% more performance overall, while the A750 Orc OC comes in at a slightly less, but still impressive, 6% more performance thanks to the newer driver. While the A380 Elf didn't seem all that impressive with some fairly low frame rates, the jump is actually still pretty solid at 7%, but isn't going to be setting any records anytime soon. Though, for the cost, it's still pretty impressive. Now at 1440p, the gains are equally as strong, with the Titan OC being boosted by 9%, the Orc OC by 6%, and the A380 Elf by 7%, which considering these cards are geared more towards 1080p gaming, is nothing to snub your nose at. So free performance is free performance, you can't really have too much room to complain, though I still feel like I was expecting maybe a little bit more. Based on the cost, which is pretty impressive, it does still offer something for those wanting to explore the sub $300 mark, but I can't help but feel that other options on the market, including the RTX 4060, which is known to offer not so great value for money, but could actually be the better option. Now, that to one side and just purely focusing on Intel, there are a few things to discuss. The gains from the release driver to the latest stable driver is nice, but I feel there's a long way to go still, and some of the claims by Intel may be a little over-embellished, shall we say. Now, I do have to say, the A380 is a great little card, and for the price, there's nothing on the new market to rival it. But the used graphics card market may give up some better value for money. Now, in terms of the Titan and the Orc, they are pretty evenly matched, and really in terms of performance, there's no kind of real difference between the two. In terms of the cooler, the Titan is going to be the better one, and maybe that's something we'll look at in the future. Well, for now, this was all about testing the cards from Sparkle and seeing what uplift we can get between drivers. Now, speaking of Sparkle, it's great to see them back in the game, as we used to work a lot with them back in the day. And it's nice to see, I don't know, a nice little push for Intel, as I feel maybe Arc has taken a bit of a back seat. And as we know, GPU manufacturing is probably the toughest it's been in a decade, with AMD and Nvidia seemingly getting things wrong at every turn. So to sum up, the performance gains are good, with 6 to 7% gains purely from a graphics driver. I do feel there's a little way to go, but whether that can be done through a driver is something that's kind of unknown right now. I think it's clear that some gamers will be disappointed with the performance, while others who may already own these cards will be pleased to see some strides taking place, at least in certain titles. For me, yeah, I feel this is the start of something good, but maybe the hardware side of things is still a somewhat limiting factor. And I actually honestly believe the next generation of Arc GPUs could be an even bigger step in the right direction. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. With that said, that about wraps this one up. If you enjoyed the video, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. And if you love what we do, then check out the exclusive eTeknix Patreon Club, where you'll get access to a whole host of goodies, including monthly live streams where we talk directly with our supporters, exclusive behind the scenes content, including videos about what's coming up and how we test, bi-weekly game nights where we play silly web-based games and have a lot of fun, and of course, early access videos, plus much, much more. The link for all that great stuff is down below. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.